we move forward with this or not, or when do we move forward with this?
Yeah.
So,
I I think that this is probably the better way for Lucasfilm to be, doing this sort of thing, like developing a movie is like, okay, um, you know, hire a director, hire writers, get the project to a place where they're comfortable that everybody's happy, and then announce it when you're, at that point and close to
mhm.
casting and filming, instead
Yep.
of like with the Rogue Squadron movie or the Taika Waititi movie or any number of other movies that have been talked about, like announcing it when it's just a idea in somebody's head and like a commitment, like, okay, well, Patty Jenkins said she'll do it, so we're announcing the
Yeah.
movie, um, just because like it feels like to me, my interpretation is that Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, and Lucasfilm are committed to only making Star Wars projects they believe in and that they think are right for Star Wars, or get Star Wars in the way that is important to them. I think they want
Hmm.
to protect it in that regard. They want to protect like what Star Wars is by only making things that they feel like live up to not just a quality standard, but also a standard of being in line with the ethos of Star Wars. And I think that's really important for them. So they have been
Yes,
uncompromising.
I will add on to that because I think the Andor has like kind of proven this to me too, is that they also do want projects that will move the franchise forward and be unique and play on the strengths of the creators and allow creative freedom rather than just like rehashing the same like nostalgia trip over and over again. Like I do think they want to I think with the faith and freedom they've given Andor, like I do think that is something they prioritize as well, which I don't know if I would have been able to say like a year or two ago.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, the word I was just going to use was uncompromising. I think they've been
Hmm.
uncompromising with that dedication to. I sound like I'm like a PR for them or something, using words like
Mm.
dedication, but with that dedication to only make things that they think belong or fit or are live up to those standards for Star Wars. And the reason I say that is like, and I totally agree with you. I think they do want to they want people to push Star Wars. They want people to make their own personal vision of Star Wars. They don't want everything to just be the same old thing rehashed over and over again, um, like you said. But I think hiring Lord and Miller to do Solo or hiring Taika Waititi to do a Star Wars movie, to me, that's all the evidence you need right there that they want things that are different and personal. Because if you want cookie cutter, those aren't the guys you're hiring to make a movie for you, right? Like
Hmm.
you don't hire those people expecting cookie cutter. I don't know exactly what happened with Lord and Miller and Solo. I don't think anybody does. Well, some people do, but I
Hmm.
don't think it's generally known
Some people do.
exactly what happened. Yeah, like
Hmm.
yeah, and I don't know what's going on with the Rogue Squadron thing or Patty Jenkins or anything like that. And I hate to make him my perpetual punching bag, but I feel like with Episode 9 that they looked at what Colin Trevorrow wrote and his writing partner and what they wrote, and they said this does not live up to, or this does not meet or fit whatever the ethos and the worldview and the ideas of Star Wars, and we can't make that. And I think that for him it was like, well, this is what I want to make, and they were in an impasse, and so they didn't do it anymore. And obviously with Solo that was even more painful because they were like mostly done making the movie, and they were like, we can't agree on this. I don't know if that was so much the same kind of issue or not. Maybe that was like a different issue.
Hmm.
But I feel like it's been so messy various times because they have this
Hmm.
uncompromising kind of vision for what a Star Wars project needs to be, and then when people don't get there, it's like this big fallout and this big mess, and it sucks because we're looking forward to Rogue Squadron, or we're looking forward to Colin Trevorrow's Episode 9, or we're looking forward to Solo by Lord Miller, and then it doesn't happen.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think having a writer and having a director and having a script and having confidence that everybody kind of wants the same thing, and then announcing
Mhm.
the movie is going to be a better formula if that's what they're doing. And it kind of feels like in this case, that seems like what's happening.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's been a learning process for them. Like they're doing the thing that basically only, one person had done before, from one person's brain,
Hmm.
to, try to carry that on with, integrity and fidelity. And it's sometimes worked out, sometimes it hasn't. Some things, didn't get off the ground, and it was probably, a blessing in disguise. And other things, got off the ground and existed and ended up being disappointing, in various ways. And it's they've experienced like the whole spectrum of it, I
Yeah.
think. And also, while dealing with um a passionate fan base, huge financial expectations on like the corporate Disney side of things, um and then also, like, this like weird culture war thing that's like happening within, like, mostly like the United States. Um, I don't know how much it's affected other countries' perceptions of Star Wars and stuff, but it's like Star Wars has become like one of those things that are just, at least maybe not. No, yeah, still, are like the center of this like weirdo, like alt right shenanigans that are going on, and making everyone miserable. So yeah, there's a lot that I don't think they could have predicted when they were like, "Hey, we're gonna make new Star Wars movies." Like, I
Yeah.
don't think, yeah, like, and a pandemic
Well,
and like all this stuff,
yeah.
unprecedented things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's also like, it really depends on what your definition of success is too, right? And how do they define success?
Mm-hmm.
How does the audience define success, etc.? I feel like sometimes when people talk about this stuff, it's like, oh well, they've announced 5 movies that they haven't made, or they had to fire 2 directors or whatever. So like, that's not a success. Yeah, I mean, like in terms of PR or in terms of just like perception, I guess, or whatever. Yeah, you could be more successful than that. But like to me, you know, having made every project they announced and not firing anybody, and having 40% of the stuff they put out not live up to their standards, and not kind of weaken the brand overall or the identity of what Star Wars is and means, to me that's far less successful. You know what I mean? I think it's more successful to have a messy production cycle and take some PR hits, and ultimately at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day be satisfied with the movies they've made. And I know that like obviously not every individual person is going to love everything that they've made, but if they can as a studio or a team, look at everything they've made and say, some of these movies and some of these shows are better than others, or work better than others, or whatever, but like we
Mm-hmm.
didn't compromise what we think is important for you know Star Wars to be and to mean. And so, like, I would rather have a messy trail of canceled projects and, you know, ultimately that kind of success than like, oh man, there was never any bumpy roads, but some of these movies are mid, as MJF would say.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, Kathy
Uh,
Kennedy doesn't seem to, miss a chance to throw Solo under the bus. So
no, what do you mean?
I
Does
think
she do
like
that?
it's happened.
No, I was just gonna say, even if she doesn't think that movie is that good, maybe she's like, ah, that movie is whatever. Like, I don't think the Book of Boba Fett's all that good personally. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I'm also not like they did damage to the brand of Star Wars because they made something that was like antithetical to the ethos of Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried about like somebody making a Star Wars thing that is like really undermines what Star Wars, what they believe, and probably I would agree with them, believe, Star Wars should be. That's what I'm more worried about. Like I don't care if you make a weird Star Wars project, if you're Taika Waititi or you're Lord and Miller, or if like I mean, there's a couple Star Wars movies and shows that you don't like very much, Ryan, that you think are not that good.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen, and it probably happens with the people that work there. You know what I mean? But at least you didn't like green light it and make it knowing like, oh, God, this is like the exact opposite of what I think Star Wars should go for, or strive for, or whatever. Like that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty nebulous too, and I think like especially with how we're seeing Star Wars be different things that, some people would, some some people would say like I I don't want to watch some serious political Star Wars show. Like I want lightsabers and TIE fighters and X-wings fighting. Like who cares about all this stuff?
So
S-
so yeah, yeah, but like I guess and this is I don't know, just how I feel about Star Wars, I guess, but like to me, it's not about that. It's not about making a show that everybody wants to watch. To me, it's like when you make your political spy thriller about Star Wars,
Mhm.
does it still have some level of hope or optimism? And there's not a lot of it in Andor, by the way. But like, I
Mhm.
don't feel like it's celebrating. I don't know, man. You got to read the script for Colin Trevorrow's episode 9 and read the conclusion of that script and then come back to me, because
I've
just
already
reading it, I'm like,
experienced.
this thing. No, I know what you're gonna say, and
I
that's
know.
fine. But like,
Yeah, I don't. I can't imagine it being worse than what I saw in the theater. But
oh, it was
um,
exponentially
no.
worse. And
Well,
it's
either
like,
way,
okay,
like
this,
it's,
if you
it's
make a
time to
Star
move
Wars
on from
rom,
episode
you make
nine.
it. You make a Star Wars rom-com and it doesn't work for part of your
Hmm.
audience because they don't want to see that kind of Star Wars movie. You make a Star Wars show like
Hmm.
Andor that's a slow burn political thriller, and that's not the kind of thing
Hmm.
people want to see. Fine. That's not what I'm talking about. I think they're going to have to do that, right? Like they should do that. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
What I'm talking
Hmm.
about is like when you watch the movie, I'm like, this betrays the things that Star Wars is supposed to stand for. That's what I'm talking about. And yes, it can
But
be a
I
little
think,
nebulous, but
yeah, I think people are going to define that in such different ways that,
yeah, of course people are, but I think the people that run
yeah.
Lucasfilm have defined it in a way that they think is similar to how George Lucas defined it, and I think they're trying to protect that integrity to like what it's supposed to be. And that's why I think there's been so much messiness, because they're not willing to compromise on that. And it doesn't mean everybody else in the world has to agree with what they think Star Wars should be, but they're the ones
Hmm.
making it. We're talking about creative vision, right? We're talking about artists
Yeah.
making something that they believe in. Not doesn't mean everybody else in the world has to believe in it, but if they believe in it, I'm glad that they're unwilling to let that go, because God, we don't want to take another L in the press for canceling a movie. You know what I mean? Cancel the movie. Like have it be messy in the public relations sphere if it has to be, but make stuff you believe in. And it doesn't mean everybody else has to. Make stuff you believe in. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But I also think that, like, probably not everyone at Lucasfilm even has the same agreement on, like, the core principles of what make, around that too. And I think it is kind of
Well,
just like a case by case basis.
I don't know, because I think Kathleen Kennedy, I think Dave Filoni, I think like when we read about this secret writers room, I feel like that's a big part of it. Is like we're going to get people in this room and at this table to break this story, and we want to have a brain trust so that as we break the
Hmm.
story, it's like the I don't want to say the best minds, but we get a group of great minds together to make sure we put something together that like works, you know. And I don't know. I mean, sure, not every single person that works at Lucasfilm is going to have the same vision for it, but I think like the people who are producing and really like those, I don't how many names are there? 5 names, 10 names, 15 names? I don't know how many
Mhm.
names there are, but like the people who really have sway and who are really going to be the
Mhm.
ones making those kinds of decisions, I feel like they probably, you know, are pretty close on that stuff.
Hmm. I mean, yeah, I think it's less of like, is this thing like the aligned with the core principles of Star Wars, which I think can be defined in many different ways, or is this a good story set in the Star Wars universe in a way that makes sense? Is kind of more what I feel like it is, because like I hear people every day telling me what Star Wars is and what it isn't, and we've been hearing that a whole lot more in the past 4 or 5 years. And sometimes I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Or like, does it really need to have that thing in it to be Star Wars? Like, um, and so like, I don't know. I don't think I really have like a clear definition, or like a you know I have no non-negotiables when it comes to like what a Star Wars thing is. Like, I just want good stories that are well made, set in the Star Wars universe. And beyond that, like, I don't really care whether there's like, themes of found family, or themes of hope and optimism, or light and dark, or like whatever those all that stuff is. Um because like it just needs to be, a good story set in that world, universe, galaxy, for
Hmm.
me.
Okay. All right.
Because I think,
Yeah.
even with like, the stories that George Lucas told, like, those themes changed, and some of them, uh there is like, there's different ideas in the original trilogy and the prequels. Yeah, there's like some crossover, there's rhyming, um but there's also, and then there's been like different ideas in like the Disney era as well, and in episodes of the Clone Wars and all this. And I don't think it always has to like go back to like, okay, this Star Wars project's coming to a close, it needs to end like Return of the Jedi now. Like, um I don't know. I think it's
Yeah.
like things are broadening, and I think that's good, and that's kind of my guess for what I think the thinking at Lucasfilm is.
Yeah, I want him to broaden too, but I think I've heard the term non-negotiable come up in reference to a few of these failed projects and things like that. And like, so for instance, like you said, like, oh well, there's different themes and different, you know, kind of ideas in George Lucas's Star Wars movies. Yeah, I mean, like the prequels take a really different approach to like a Star Wars trilogy and a Star Wars story than the original trilogy did, you know, in a lot of ways. But also, I'm like, okay, so in the wrong hands, the scene where Anakin decapitates Count Dooku could be celebrated as like, you know, the the right thing to do in that moment. And to me, it's like, okay, well that wouldn't fit with Star Wars for me. And it's not about genre, it's not about look, it's not about like always has to have the same story or the same theme or the same outcome or like anything like that. But you know, I just feel like if it's nihilistic or I don't know, sort of celebrating the wrong things, I feel like it's to me that would be something that would feel like it was not working for Star Wars really for me anyway. Um,
Mm,
and I think it's I don't know how long the list is of things that I think it's less about like stuff that needs to be there or like oh every Star Wars has to have this. I think it's more just like there's a few things and I'm not even sure, you know, I don't have a list. I don't know if I could define
mhm.
them necessarily myself, but I think there's at least a few things where it would be like this wouldn't feel right. This would feel like the wrong thing to do. This would feel like it's in opposition to the principles of like these stories. um and yeah, I don't know, I mean, there's so many already different Star Wars stories that
Mhm.
I feel like they feel different in so many ways. But I don't know, I can't think of anything that's been put out, for me personally anyways, as different as some of these Star Wars shows and stories and movies and everything are. I can't think of anything that I feel like doesn't pass the test of like, or fails the test, I guess, of betraying the values of like what, you know George Lucas created for Star Wars to be. uh I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we get that really. I can't think of like any examples of like major media franchises where like a total where something like totally doesn't get it. Um cuz even like with like MCU stuff or like DC stuff or um I don't know, Lord of the Rings, whatever, like Harry Potter, like any of these like giant conglomerate franchises, like I mean, you don't really have any like major outliers. Like you get stuff of varying quality. Like you get your your Morbius and stuff like in there. Uh but it never really seems to like hurt the um there's never been anything like, wow, we like how do we even like recover from this? Like this was so like tonally off. Um
Mm,
but I think like yeah, I think it more is like a question of like quality and um like financial performance as well. um but
yeah, yeah.